Hi, welcome to On the Edge. I am Angela Merle, and my guest today is Nicole Callender.
Hey,
Nicole
hey.
is Nicole is an actress, stunt woman, stunt coordinator, intimacy coordinator, wife, and mother of two beautiful girls. Welcome to the show, Nicole.
Thank you. And thanks for having me, Angela.
Welcome, welcome, welcome. Thank you for coming. So, I started off with all these amazing, grand things that you do. What made you want to become a stunt woman? Like, what was your path to becoming a stunt woman?
Well, I actually came to New York City back in the in the 1900s.
Stop it.
In the late 90s to pursue acting. And so I
Okay.
came here on an off-Broadway contract where I
Mhm,
was playing Joan of Arc and in Henry Six, one,
mhm,
two, and three.
mhm,
So I auditioned for that show in Cincinnati, Ohio. And I happened to know the fight choreographer for that show. And they wanted somebody who could sword fight.
mhm,
And so he was choreographing. He said, "Why don't you audition?" And at the time, I was living in Ohio, in Cincinnati, and I wanted to come to New York to act. And I thought, well, here's an opportunity. So I went to this audition at Cincinnati Playhouse in the Park to audition for something they were doing there. And you know how you have the little talk with the person before the audition and they ask you
mhm.
questions. And I said, well, I was getting ready to go the next weekend to audition for this Henry Sixth at Theater for a New Audience in New York. And she chuckled slightly and basically was like, they're never going to hire a little girl from Ohio for that job.
Oh,
And
what?
it felt like she said to me, they're never going to hire a little black girl from Ohio. That's what it
Yeah,
felt like. And in
yeah.
my head, I carried that with me. Can I
Mhm,
quote that she said that exactly? I really don't remember, but that's what it felt like. But I do know she said
mhm,
they're never going to hire a little girl from Ohio for that job. And I thought, wow, that was really harsh. We're just in an audition here. And then I still had to go on and do my audition,
Oh my
which
gosh.
I did not get that job, which turned out to be fine.
Mhm.
And then I came up to New York and I auditioned and they cast me. And then I
Look at
moved.
that.
I left Cincinnati after that. And
See?
yep.
Look out. Lady,
How
you
you
don't
like me
understand
now?
now. I think we all have one of those stories. We all
Yeah.
have one of those stories. So,
Yeah.
what made you so you made the transfer, you made the jump as we call whatever, however you want to word it, from acting to stunts. What was your first stunt job?
My first stunt job was on a show called Full Court Press. And if I think about it, I don't know if that was a movie or a TV show.
I
Were you
think
on
that's
there?
where we met. Yeah. It was a
Yeah.
movie
Okay. In the
that I
when we were in the bleachers, right?
yes.
And we all came, right?
Yes.
So that was the first thing that I think I actually auditioned for and got,
Mhm.
but I can't really
Mhm.
remember. But I met Jeff Ward, Douglas
Mhm.
Crosby, Jen
All great
Lamb,
leaders.
you,
Mhm.
all those people who, went on to become coordinators.
Mhm.
Back then, as you know, there weren't a whole lot of small black anybody, let
Nope.
alone women,
Nope.
doing this kind of work. So I think
Mhm.
that when I showed up, they were kind of like, oh, well, who are you? We don't have a lot of your type.
Mhm.
And so I was kind of like, all right. But I had been auditioning for theater.
Okay.
I'd been doing a lot of theater auditions. I don't even really remember how that audition came around. But if you remember, we had to, break up into groups and figure out some choreography.
Yeah,
And they had
yeah.
given us, like, come up with like 4 or 5 beats of choreography.
Mhm.
And I was in a group with some people that I didn't know, and I started helping put together the choreography, and they came around and they were like, "Oh, so you know how to fight, you know how to do this," and I was like, "Yeah,
Mhm.
from my stage work and stuff." So
Yes.
they just were kind of like, "Oh, okay," and I kind of got scooped up in it because they just didn't have a lot of me, and I think my height was a big part of
A lot
that.
of you. I don't think there was anybody, okay?
Well, okay.
Let's just say that. There wasn't anybody.
There wasn't anybody. They were desperate, so they were like,
Yeah,
"Come on,
yeah.
we'll
I
use
mean,
you."
of course, Kim Washington was around, but
Right. But
not in the
she
same
still yeah, she wasn't in New York at that time anymore
Mhm.
either. You know, I think she had
Yeah.
done whatever it is, whether she was in California or back where she
Mhm.
is. So she wasn't around a whole lot either.
Right.
So I was just like, okay, okay, you all
Mhm.
are going to pay me this much money to
Yeah.
fall down. And back then, I think that paycheck was $536 or something like
Yes.
that.
Yes.
And
Yes.
so, it was just one of those things where I was like, no, I knew that I could do it. I knew I needed
Mhm.
training still, but
Mhm.
they were willing to, trust me and
Right.
continue to call.
Mhm.
And so I did. And I doubled kids, I doubled boys,
Mhm.
I filled a lot of general ethnicity, when they needed the cop who was Latina, and they didn't have the Latina they didn't think they had anyway, that,
Right.
they could just slick this back and put on a hat.
Yes.
And I filled that. I knew what was going on. I was a diversity
Yeah.
person for
Yeah.
them. I was the start of that. And
Mhm.
I think you can look at it a number of different ways, but I looked at it in a positive light, and that I was helping bring more awareness to that we're out
Yes.
here.
Exactly.
Yeah.
Exactly. So you said that you've doubled kids and boys, but you've also doubled the legendary Kerry Washington, Megan Good,
Yes.
Janelle Monet, just to name
Yes.
drop.
Yeah.
Okay. Like, come
You do it for
on.
me.
I do it for you willingly. Yes, because you are amazing. You're talented. And I look at you and think, wow, she's wearing so many hats now. I mean, it's just amazing how far you've come since we first met, and you're just blazing that trail. So you went from being this amazing stunt performer, which you still do stunts,
Hmm.
and then you went
Hmm.
on to start coordinating and
Hmm.
intimacy coordinating. So let's
Hmm.
start with the intimacy. The intimacy
Okay.
coordinating, I think we should probably wait for that because you've done so much with that. The stunt coordinating, you've coordinated what shows now? Come on,
Um,
name drop.
no, I can't name drop a whole lot. Um, I did the beginning of the Anna Delvey project.
Hmm.
Um, I think that was a Netflix show. I only did the beginning of it. It got interrupted by COVID, and when
Oh,
COVID came back, I opted not to go back on that
oh,
job. Um, I covered Brian Smy for a Saturday Night Live.
hmm,
Um, I just this past summer, I did something called Beneath the Grass, which isn't out yet, but I
okay.
was the stunt coordinator and the intimacy coordinator on that
Uh-huh.
one.
Okay.
Um, I did another indie that is not out yet, that
Hmm.
has Blair Underwood and Sarah Silverman. Still waiting for
Okay.
that to come out. And
Yes,
then
yes.
I've covered some people on some stuff.
Mhm,
So I haven't done real big, huge things. I've just taken on jobs that I felt like I was really confident in, and
uh-huh,
that I could handle all of the things that were being asked of me.
which is
So
good.
recently, somebody had asked me, not recently, maybe a year ago, to do a job that was a lot of water stuff.
Mhm,
And I was like, I'm not really your girl for the water. Like, I'm uncomfortable with the water. I mean, I can swim and I can save myself, but that's just not my thing. They were like, come
mhm.
on, you just need to find you need to find your water person.
You're
You need to, and I
yes.
was like, no, I know that. And I have
Mhm,
some people that I know I can call, but it's just still not my thing. And
mhm,
maybe I need to get better with saying, oh, sure, I'll do it, and then working it out. But that causes me anxiety,
mhm.
because I feel like you have people's lives in your hands. And if I
Yes.
don't feel 100% confident in being able to stand up for the safety of it, then I just feel like just find somebody else that's better suited for it.
Mhm,
So
mhm.
that's why I did
Well,
that.
we all know that we all know coordinators that don't have that specialty at hand and they just hire a crew. But
Hmm.
you
Hmm.
were smart for yourself, which you wanted to do, and passed on it, which I totally probably would have done the same thing because if you're not comfortable, then you're not going to give 100%, right?
Yeah. Right.
So,
And you know
yeah.
how the dynamics can get too.
Hmm.
on the set, if I'm not that confident and then the person that I hire is the one that's starting to run the show, then I kind of feel like
Yes,
just hire that person, right?
exactly.
Because then who do you start to listen to?
Mm-hmm.
Me or that person? So honestly, it was just something I didn't want to get wrapped up in. I didn't want to feel the stress of it.
Mm-hmm.
So I just said no. And this person really tried to get me to come along, but I just, at this point in my career, I want to keep enjoying what I'm doing. I want to keep loving it, and I don't want to
Yes.
be where I'm just stressed all the time. And
Mm-hmm.
stunt coordination can be very stressful, so I tend to just pick what I feel most comfortable with.
Mm-hmm. And that makes total sense because again, you'll give it your all. So we all know about this getting in the room. And for you, now that you have become this amazing intimacy coordinator, can you walk us through the path that took you? Can you walk us through how you became a intimacy coordinator? Because it wasn't that big a few years ago, but it has grown so much in the last 5 years that
Yes, yes,
just walk us through
huge.
that. How did you become an intimacy coordinator?
Well, I had been continuing with my stunt career, doing the
Mm-hmm.
stunt work and doing the stunt coordination. When I started to hear about intimacy coordination, it piqued my interest. And then, so I just kind of started listening to some of the, you know, gurglings that were going on about it.
Mm-hmm.
And then there was, I had some friends who were both in theater and in intimacy coordination. And there's a woman out there named Alicia Rodas who is huge in terms of bringing intimacy coordination to to film and TV. She
Okay.
does a lot with HBO, and her and HBO together worked to codify a lot of the best practices that we now implement.
Okay.
And she at one point needed she runs all of the HBO shows.
Mm-hmm.
I don't know if she runs all of them 100%, but she's
Mm-hmm.
exclusive with HBO. She probably
Mm-hmm.
has some help
Wow.
running those shows, but she's exclusive with them, and they've worked to develop what seems like a quite nice relationship.
Mm-hmm.
And during the beginning times of that, she was looking for somebody who could help cover her on some jobs. But she couldn't necessarily just take someone who just random anybody, you know.
Right.
So she was looking for someone who had a lot of set experience, looking for somebody who could train, somebody that she could train, somebody that could
Mm-hmm.
shadow. And so her and I got together. We had a meeting. We did a lot of talking about what intimacy coordinating is, the training that's needed, and if I was interested in, and did I think this was something I could handle. And I thought that it was.
Mm-hmm.
So I did some training with her and some other people in the organization of intimacy directors and coordinators.
Mm-hmm.
So I started to shadow her on a couple of her episodes of The Deuce. And once I had done that with her and did some other training and did some other personal training that was needed, I started to cover her on some of the shows that she was doing. So I wasn't running the whole show. She was basically running the show, doing the background work. But
Mm-hmm.
then I was the one showing up on set to run the
Mm-hmm.
set for the day while she was busy going to another set. So she would
Okay.
take the jobs where there was probably a lot, it was a heavy intimacy day for her,
Mm-hmm.
but there was another smaller job that I could step into, that she felt
Mm-hmm.
comfortable letting me step into, helping me get my feet wet with that kind of work.
Mm-hmm.
And then I did the uh, um, a porn photo shoot for the
What?
Deuce, which was I
Okay.
don't know if you've ever watched the Deuce, but they have posters in the background that are
Mm-hmm.
like porn posters. And so
Okay.
they needed some new posters and they needed
Uh-huh.
someone to help run this photo shoot.
Uh-huh.
And so I took over the running of that photo shoot, which was, which was
Welcome, day one.
welcome day one. Everybody's naked.
Oh my God.
Everybody. Everybody was naked. And they had costume pieces, right?
Uh-huh.
To accentuate one thing or another. And so I was
Okay.
there to help. Like, It was a porn photo
Wow.
shoot. They had to be
Wow.
doing things. They had to be doing simulated activities sometimes
Really?
with another person, sometimes on their own. So I was there to kind of run that show.
Oh,
And
okay.
I mean, it was a riot of a day. It was
I'm
a great
sure.
day. The people, the actors that hired were so willing. They were so incredibly willing to do so many things. And I had to kind of be like, okay, we don't need all of that. And then,
Oh
you got
my
to cover
gosh.
up when we're done. And like, it was walking people through a
Mhm.
protocol, right? Because
Okay.
people
Okay.
who are comfortable being naked
Mhm.
on camera, on set, are often comfortable just being naked. And
Yeah.
so what you have to realize is that your crew is probably not all that comfortable with that
Mhm.
nudity. And
Mhm.
so even though you're comfortable, you still need to cover yourself up. We're still
Right.
in a professional environment and we don't
Right.
know what's going on with other people. So
Mhm.
we still have to be respectful of that. So anyway, we did this photo shoot all day. We had this great photographer who was just really great and patient. And we were doing it. We were working things. We had a wardrobe person there. We had a wardrobe person there named Carmia, who had also done some intimacy training. So she was kind of
Okay.
in the groove with how to handle things. And then at one point, one of the execs from HBO came downstairs
Mhm.
and said something like, "Yeah, I heard what you're doing. I heard your name down here, and just we're just so pleased to have you
Oh,
and help you
yay.
run and have you running this for us." And so
Mhm.
that was a big that was kind of big. What I've learned is that
Yes.
it's a lot of word of mouth.
Mhm.
Um,
Mhm.
so I wound up so I wound up doing that. And then I did at that point Alicia started to feel, I think, a bit more comfortable with me handling the jobs. And she passed on another job to me, which had Nicole Kidman in it.
Mhm.
And it was I'm not going to remember the name of it right now because I'm going to think too hard about it. But it was
Okay.
a pretty
Okay.
gruesome show. I'll have to look at my
Really?
resume. It's a pretty gruesome show. And we had an intimacy, and I was the intimacy coordinator, and I actually
Mhm.
did that whole show. That was
Uh-huh.
the first show that I had done on my own with an introduction from Alicia. And
Okay.
there was an executive producer on that who is an executive producer who started off as a craftsperson. She might
Oh
have
my.
even started off as a PA. Like she was a
Love
PA and moved up to crafts and then and worked her way up to executive
Yes.
producer.
I love it. I
And
love it.
yeah, so she was really supportive of this whole
Mhm.
idea. When I came on set, she was like, "Come with me," and escorting me to to the director's monitor. And,
Mhm.
she just really got the usefulness and the benefit of it.
Mhm. Mhm.
After I did that job, some other executive producers reached out to her and said, "I'm looking for an intimacy coordinator. Do you know of any?" And she was like, "Oh, I
Yes.
worked with her. Give her a
Mhm.
call." And that's
Mhm.
how I feel like I've continued to get work because I
Mhm.
was also on, I think it was Ghost at the time.
Mhm.
I was talking to one of the executive producers and she said, we had introduced ourselves and she was like, "Oh, yes, I had been wanting to meet you." She's like,
Oh,
I've heard you're like the go to intimacy
yes.
coordinator." And
Mhm.
I was like, "Oh, really?" And she's like, "No, at that, in our meetings, it was like, she's the one to get." I
Wow.
hadn't heard that.
Wow.
Nobody had
Wow.
shared that information with me. So I was like, "Oh, okay." Now,
Well,
is that the truth or not? I don't know, but it made me
yeah.
feel good and I liked hearing it. But I do feel like even the jobs that I've got since that time have
Mhm.
come from either a UPM, an EP, or an actor that I worked with who then recommended
Okay.
me.
That's awesome. The
Yeah.
one thing that we didn't start with is what is an intimacy coordinator? We should probably tell
We
people
should
that.
tell. Yes. So, an intimacy coordinator is a person who advocates for actors on any TV or film set. We advocate to make sure that there's full transparency in any nudity or simulated sex act and that there's what I like to call like conscious consent on
Yes.
the simulated sex that you are about to perform.
Mhm.
So I like to look at it like I meet you once you've read the script and you've decided you're willing to do this nudity and simulated sex.
Mhm.
Once you have said, yes, I'm willing to do it, now we're going to get in the room together with our directors and producers and talk
Mhm.
about the context of what we're getting ready, what the story is,
Mhm.
the and the story within the intimacy, as well as the story within the arc of the show. We're going to talk about uh, context. I'm trying to get it all right in my head. Context, consent, choreography. Uh, there's another one in there, and closure.
Mhm.
Uh, so so then we start to talk about, what is the story? How are we going to tell that story? And what are you comfortable showing? So like a director might say, I want to see full nudity on the top. Uh, and I don't need to see pubic hair. And
Mhm.
so then I make sure that the actor is also comfortable with that. And an
Mhm.
actor might say, well, I'm comfortable showing my breasts but not my nipples. Is there a way
Mhm.
that we can cover that, or we can mask it? So then
Mhm.
we start a dialogue,
Mhm.
right? And a DP is also, I feel like, very important to these conversations. Sometimes they're in the room and sometimes they're not, because they can
Mhm.
talk about where they can put the camera to angle
Mhm.
things so that you're not seeing uh, nipples or something else that an actor might not want you to see.
Right.
So,
Right.
so we talk about that. If we're lucky,
Mhm.
we get a rehearsal in which we can get into the room and actually put the choreography together. We
Mhm.
never do a rehearsal nude. We always do
Mhm.
it fully clothed, and we do kind of a broad sketch of what's going to
Mhm.
happen. And if people want to wind up kind of getting in position, we can. And we do that choreography with the director, with myself, and usually an executive producer.
Mhm.
Actors love it because they start to learn more about their character, and they wind up asking questions about other parts of their character and other
Mhm.
scenes. But
Mhm.
then when we get to set, well, before we get to set, I communicate with hair and makeup and with wardrobe to let them know what the scene is, how
Mhm.
detailed this scene is, what we're going to see, what we're not going to see, and make sure that they can provide the proper modesty garments for it. If
Mhm.
not, I have a kit in which I will provide them for. But most of these wardrobe people, they're the ones who were doing all of this before an intimacy coordinator came on
Right.
board. But
Right.
we'll just communicate to make sure we're all on the same page.
Mhm.
Then I get to set, I check in with my actors, I make sure they're feeling comfortable about the day, help them with any issues they might have, help them put on the modesty wear if they need it. I
Mhm.
describe how to put it on, I'll show how to put it on, and then I'll let
Mhm.
them do it. But if they need
Mhm.
assistance, then I'm there to help. And then I actually make sure that the set is following the closed set protocols. So
Okay.
if we have to have monitors that are flagged and tinted so that people can't walk up and just watch what's going on, I'm going to help
Mhm.
make sure that happens. I make sure that clothes are staying on until we've slated. Uh, they'll get in position in the bed, clothes will come off.
Mhm.
None of that happens until they slate, right? So
Mhm.
they slate and then they leave the room. And now it's
Okay.
like, okay, actors can get into position. I'll ask the crew, turn away, give them some
Mhm.
privacy while they get into bed, because they still have their robes and modesty garments on, but it's still
Right.
uncomfortable to
Yeah.
undress like that in front of
Mhm.
people. So
Mhm.
I help them get set, get the covers where the covers need to be. And then I say, I let the first AD know I'm leaving set and that they
Mhm.
can roll. And
Mhm.
so I have to have a really good relationship with the first AD.
Mhm.
And if you do, then things are going to go great.
Mhm.
And so they're the ones running the show. I'm not running the
Mhm.
show. I'm just that extra thing, and they're going, okay, they're safe, they're ready to go, they're in position. They
Right.
do their thing, they say cut. Nobody comes out onto the set unless it's the wardrobe people to give robes. They give
Mhm.
them the robes, we make sure they're covered, and then we're like, all right, set's open, crew has it, crew comes on in to do all the fixings that they want to do. Once they're
Mhm.
set, then we start that process all over again.
All over
And then I
again.
go and I do a little walk around the set to make sure
Mhm.
people aren't standing by a monitor and trying to catch a glimpse. Um,
Mhm.
the shows I'm on now, if we have a big nudity or simulated sex scene, the AD team will actually take all of the monitors and get them in one room. So
Really?
DIT and audio and the director's monitor, if possible, all be in one room that we put a PA in front of so nobody else
Mhm.
can watch those monitors.
That's
That's the
awesome.
simplest way to do it.
That's
Otherwise, you've
awesome.
got to get your grips to set up, flags and tents all over the monitors. It takes
Mhm.
a lot of extra work for them. But
Mhm.
if we know it's going to happen and I'm in the production meeting, then I can remind them that we're probably going to need that, which is another
Mhm.
good reason why an intimacy coordinator should be on
In
your
the room.
production call from the beginning.
Wow.
So then I work with them. I do little check-ins every now and again, make sure
Mhm.
everybody's feeling okay. We're following the choreography properly. I watch at the director's monitor to make sure it looks good.
Mhm.
Is
Mhm.
it lined up properly? You know how angles are on TV. Like
Yes.
you're
Yes.
doing one thing, but it might not actually look right, and we need to adjust it. And I'll
Mhm.
look at it and be like, am I buying the story? Does
Mhm.
it look real? Does it look hot and steamy? And if not, I'll kind of be like,
Hmm.
hmm, I don't buy it. And
Uh-huh.
depending on my relationship with the director,
Okay.
we have to work up to that. They have to learn to trust me and
Mhm.
trust that I know what I'm doing. And so I'll ask them if they're happy with it, is usually what I'll say. And generally they go, yeah. And then they go,
Mhm.
why? And then I'll bring up
Really?
my opinion of why.
Uh-huh.
And
Uh-huh.
they'll think, oh, okay, well, let's try that. And I say, okay, here's the adjustment I would give. Do you want to
Mhm.
tell them or do you want me to tell them?
Mhm.
And usually in the beginning, they say, no, I'll tell them. And I'm like, all right. So, they'll go tell them. Usually by the time we're done working, they're like, no, Nicole, you go tell them. Can you go fix that? I'm like, yes, I can.
That's
And so I have my
awesome.
relationship and I talk to the actors and I tell them what we need to fix it. It's just
Mhm.
another note. It's another director's note. It's just coming from
Mhm.
an intimacy coordinator. So
Oh my goodness.
and then once that is done, and everybody, the scene is done, the actors, if they're done for the day, I can catch them and do a little closure exercise where we just try to separate character from actor
Okay.
so they can kind of just put all that in a box and wrap it up and not
Uh-huh.
carry it with them when they go home. It's a very different situation to do on set than it is in theater because as
Okay.
you know on set they're like, all right, that scene's wrapped, we're moving on to the next scene, and
Yes.
everybody, that's that mass exodus to get to the
Mhm.
next scene. The actor has
Mhm.
to change whatever it is, and so a lot of times I kind of have to do it on the fly while we're heading up into the elevator or wherever to talk about, do you feel good about what happened today? Are you feeling comfortable with it? Just whatever it is that we can do to really kind of bookend, really put a period on that
Mhm.
and wrap it up and not have it linger, especially if it's a particularly dramatic scene for the day. If it's an attack or a
Mhm.
simulated rape or there's some violence that goes along with it, I think it's really important to just help them be done with that, not
Right.
linger,
Right.
not linger
Uh-huh.
with that energy.
So
And
with
then I
that,
take some notes on the day about how it went. I
mhm.
keep a spreadsheet about how it went.
Really?
In
Okay.
case anybody has to come back and ask some questions, I try to keep
Mhm.
some notes on it. Um, for the most part, I've had really good experiences with most of the things that I've been in. I've had some challenging times for sure, but
Mhm.
I have not had I have not had any harassment situations.
Ah, that's
I'm
good to
happy to
hear.
say, yeah.
What challenges have you had to face?
I've had a situation where people agree to what's in the script, the nudity or the simulated sex, and
Mhm.
then when we start to talk about it and rehearse it, they don't want to do it, or
Okay.
they'll in front of the director say, "Oh yeah, love it, great idea, I love it." And now
Mhm.
what I do is once that we've all talked together and we've had a
Mhm.
conversation with the director and the actors, once the director leaves the room, I speak to each actor individually, not with another actor in the room and not with the director in the room. And I say to
Mhm.
them, this is your opportunity to let me know if you're really comfortable with what we just talked about. And it's not in front of anybody else. You can't consent. You can't consciously consent when you're doing it in front of
Yeah.
somebody else.
Yeah.
So that's that opportunity. And so then I've had people say, yeah, I don't want to do anything that they just said.
Oh,
And
wow.
where it gets tricky is because, okay, well, that's fine. That's 100% fine. We can talk
Mhm.
about that. But it tends to, the optics look like the intimacy coordinator just talked them out of doing
Oh,
everything that the
yeah.
director said, right? And where I didn't,
Yeah.
but because they didn't speak up and advocate for themselves in the room,
Mhm.
that's what it'll look like. So, one of the things that I do to try to avoid that happening is I have a conversation with the director prior to, and I find out what their wish list is, what they would love to see. Then I
Mhm.
have a conversation, a private conversation with each actor and tell them what
Mhm.
the wish list is and ask them if they're comfortable with that. And if they're not, then we'll discuss some other options, what we can mask and how we can hide it. And then I'll share that information with the director so that once we come to rehearsal, everybody's on the same page by the time we've gotten to rehearsal. Because if there needs to be any back and forth, I've been the arbiter of
Mhm.
that.
Mhm.
So once we come to rehearsal, everybody is on the same page about what they're comfortable with, what they want to show, what they don't want to show. And I encourage people in that rehearsal to speak their mind.
Right.
I tell them that I come to this thinking that you have agency over your own body and mind because you're an adult and you have
Mhm.
decided that you're comfortable doing the nudity and simulated sex. I meet you there when you've made that decision. Now I'm going to help you do it safely. I'm not trying
Mhm.
to tell you that you should do it or that you
Mhm.
shouldn't do it. What I
Mhm.
do want to happen is that if you have decided that you're comfortable enough to do this nudity and simulated sex, I'm going to make sure that it's done safely and with full
Mhm.
transparency. So
Right.
speak up in the room because I can't speak for you, but
Right.
I can hold up your voice. So
Mhm.
if you
Mhm.
let it be known in the room that you're uncomfortable with something and I already know that, then I can support that. But I
Yes.
cannot
Yes.
go in and speak for you because you have agency over your own mind and body. And if you
Right.
don't hold up that agency when you're in the room with the director, then it just causes it we'll work it out, but it makes it a little more tricky,
Right.
if that makes sense.
It does. I can
So
imagine. Oh
I
my
try to be
goodness.
very transparent with all of that information prior
Mhm.
to. So then we go through all of that process. We're on the day, we've shot it, it's closed set, we've done our closure, I've taken my notes, and then they always have access to reach out to me if they have some kind of issue, if something has come up.
Uh-huh.
Uh, and I haven't had that a lot, but I have also had people always think I'm here for the woman and not the man, and I'm here
Uh-huh.
for everybody.
Everybody. Mhm.
Everybody has delicacies around touching somebody else that they don't
Right.
know well. And I had an actor one time who was very like nervous.
Mhm.
He wasn't this guy that was like, "Oh, I can't wait to do this scene, look at
Right.
what I get to do." He was like, he was really nervous about it. His counterpart was a very well seasoned actress who sometimes took up a lot of space in their needs,
Mhm.
and this the other actor wasn't getting his needs met because this
Mhm.
other actor was taking up a lot of space.
Mhm.
And we shared some really tender moments when I was finally able to say,
Hey.
I'm sorry. I know that I have been a lot of my focus went to this other actor, and that shouldn't have been. So let's
Mhm.
get down to work here with you. And we had some really, without revealing a lot of information, we shared a lot of tender moments and were able to help him get to where he needed to be to do the
Oh,
scene
good.
and feel
Good.
supported and not
Mhm.
just overlooked because his counterpart was chewing scenery all the time,
Yeah.
you
And
know,
because he's a man, I
and
mean,
because he's a
everybody gets
man.
nervous. Everyone
Yes.
gets nervous.
Yeah.
And I can only imagine doing simulated sex scenes when you just met sometimes. You've just
Right.
met the other actor.
Yes.
It's
Yeah.
gotta be challenging.
Yeah.
It's gotta be
Yeah.
challenging.
Yeah.
Okay. Now, we've discussed a lot about intimacy coordinating.
Hmm.
How do you keep it all together? Because again, you're an actor, stunt performer, stunt coordinator, intimacy coordinator, mom. When do you have time to make dinner? I mean, that's a daily thing. Like,
I
what's for
know.
dinner tonight?
I know.
How do you wear all these hats, Nicole?
Well, it's been an evolution, and it's been a journey, which I say a
Mhm,
lot. And I mean, I have a lot of support. You know, my husband is very supportive.
mhm,
Um, so there's like planning involved, you know, and it's changed from when my kids were little to where they are now. You know, I'm not having to make sure I get home and have a meal on the table at 6:30 anymore.
uh-huh.
I still like to have a meal on the table for myself at 6:30.
Yes, you have to
but
eat.
you but I'm not going to get cranky and cry about it if it doesn't happen.
Mhm,
So
mhm,
you know, I do have a lot of support that way. I just do a lot of planning. You know, I shop the week ahead of time to and I kind of try to have a meals list. So,
mhm,
you know, keeping I just try to keep the refrigerator stocked. I've always wanted everyone to eat well. You know,
mhm.
I mean, we can all eat healthier, but my kids weren't at the fast food place eating fast
Right.
food all the time. There was always food in the refrigerator for them to make a sandwich or heat up leftovers or something like that. So it took a
Mhm,
lot of planning. It wasn't always easy. It was often incredibly stressful. And you know, I mean, when they were little and like babies, and I had literally just had a baby and went back to work. I don't know what it was, maybe 4 months or 5 months. I was still pumping uh to so I could feed my baby. And so there were times when I was like, I gotta find somewhere to pump on set, like now, right now. And so I found myself on Strangers with Candy, pumping in the prison bathroom. I found
mm.
myself on the set of War of the World,
Oh my
pumping in some
gosh.
stranger's van and trying to,
Wow.
you know, carry around a cooler so I could keep that milk fresh because it was,
Mhm.
you know, couldn't waste it.
Yeah.
Um, and you just do it. I mean, what choices do you have? You got to
Right.
make it through. So
Mhm,
a lot of planning, a support team,
mhm.
and sheer determination. I don't know.
Well,
I
you're
don't
doing
know.
it. You're doing it. You're amazing and you're
You're
doing
doing
it.
it. How do you do it? I know this is supposed to be an interview about me, but
It is an interview about you. And
okay.
like you, I just do it. I don't think about it.
Yeah.
So,
Yeah.
what is there a website that people can go to find out how they can become intimacy coordinators?
Well, there's plenty of websites where you could go to get training.
Mhm,
The organization that I went through is Intimacy Directors and Coordinators, which is on the East Coast. There's a woman in London named Ita O'Brien who teaches
mhm,
people, who certifies
mhm,
people. There is an organization called Intimacy Professionals Association on the West Coast. And there are probably four or five others that you can find on the SAG website
okay.
that are certifying people in intimacy coordinating.
Mhm. That's great. That
Hmm.
you have given us a wealth of information. And in closing, how can people get in touch with you?
Well, I do have an Instagram IG
Mhm,
page, which is intimacy.coordinator. That's my IC page. I have a regular Instagram that is N Calendar.
mhm.
Pretty sure it's NL Calendar. I'm not even sure. And that's also my website is ncalendar.com.
Okay. All right. That's great.
Yeah.
Well, Miss Nicole Callender, thank you again so much for coming on the Edge. I have so enjoyed our chat.
Thank
And
you for
I
having
can't
me.
thank you. I can't wait to see what you do next. You're amazing. Thank you.
Well, thank you. Hopefully, you'll see me directing one day.
Yes, I'm sure
Yeah.
I will.
Thank
Thank you. Thank you, Nicole.
you.